What are some of the dumbest crimes people will do? Let's find out, starting with number 5, just tax money. Jorge Contreras was arrested for embezzling millions of dollars from the school district he worked in. To make matters worse, Jorge wasn't just stealing from regular schools with regular students. The schools in the district he worked in mostly serviced students from disadvantaged backgrounds, so the district received millions in federal aid. Jorge saw those millions and decided they were his to spend, and boy oh boy, Jorge spent a lot of it. His total was $14 million, and he spent it on the best luxuries he could find. First, he used the money to pay off American Express bills totaling about $1.9 million. He then withdrew cash worth about $325,000 and bought a house worth $1.5 million. After that, he bought a BMW worth over $100,000 and gave his husband $130,000. He also made payments to himself directly from district funds. The authorities found more than 250 checks deposited into his personal bank accounts. The checks ranged from around $11,000 to $95,000. Jorge dropped over $360,000 on Versace stuff and another $60,000 on some Louis Vuitton, all in the space of 1 month. He then spent $180,000 on jewelry from David Heumann over 2 weeks. You can just imagine the sort of extravagant lifestyle this guy was living. And he didn't hide it either. He was constantly posting evidence for the world to see on Instagram and garnered over 2.7 million followers. His husband also had a significant following because he also lived a large life on what we presume was the school district's dime. He and his husband always looked so glammed up that you would be forced to wonder how Jorge was getting his money. But Jorge wasn't eventually outed by his online extravagance. Instead, he slipped up. The district superintendent was alerted by Wells Fargo about some fraudulent charges on the school funds account, and he went digging. Before long, he found altered bank statements, which led to an investigation. The investigation revealed Jorge to be the thief, and he was promptly arrested. The thing is, Jorge would have been caught eventually, since that amount of money is going to be noticed by someone at some point. He was a public official, and while they can make decent money, they're not millionaires. Jorge spent so much money and lived such a flashy lifestyle that people would have eventually started snooping around. And it's not like it takes even that much investigating. The guy is lucky he wasn't caught sooner. Number 4, do it for prison time. Rossi Adams is a former social media influencer who has now been convicted for influencing his cousin to hold someone up. We say former because Adams got 14 years in the slammer and his cousin got 20. But what exactly did the duo do to go to prison? Our story starts way back in 2015 when Rossi was just a random student at the University of Iowa trying to get his grades up. That was when he founded a social media brand called State Snaps. The focus of the company was to get images of party-hard university culture. We're sure you can imagine the types of pics they'd get. They'd then grow online through the pictures going viral. But Rossi was extremely successful, and before long, his pages got hundreds of thousands of followers. He was pretty famous and was getting gigs left and right. But here's the issue. Rossi's followers often use the slogan, "Do it for state," to get people to send their raunchy pictures to him. The successful influencer saw this as an opportunity and then decided to purchase the site doitforstate.com. But the site belonged to someone else, and that person wasn't willing to sell it. Rossi threatened and begged and did everything he could to get the owner of the URL to sell, but the owner wasn't interested. So, Rossi decided to do the sensible thing and hire his cousin, Sherman Hopkins, a homeless ex-con, to force the owner of the site to transfer the site to him. That must have been easier than just coming up with a different domain. Rossi drove his cousin to the person's house and waited while Hopkins went in with a pantyhose covering his face and and a firearm in his hand. Unsurprisingly, the operation didn't work like Rossi thought it would. Injuries occurred, and the police soon arrived at the scene and arrested the two. The dumb thing about this crime was that there was no way Rossi would have gotten away with it, even if Hopkins was successful. The victim would have just reported the incident to the police, and Rossi and his cousin would have ended up in jail anyway. Number 3. The Lonesome Granny. 54-year-old Grandma Geraldine Thomas claimed over £41,000 in benefits over 5 years by claiming that she lived alone. But this grandma didn't live alone. Instead, she spent all that time secretly living with her partner in South Wales. So, what did she do with all that money? We can't be sure of what she did with all of it, but we know she spent some of it on luxurious trips to Egypt. And we know that because instead of just keeping the pictures of her extravagant lifestyle to herself, she posted them online for everyone to see. And some of the people who eventually saw the picture were government officials. This led to an investigation that eventually revealed just how far Geraldine's scam went. The authorities found out that Geraldine had wrongly claimed income support, employment support, housing benefits, and council tax over 5 years. She was eventually arrested and taken to court to face the music. She was charged with 3 counts of benefits fraud, and she pled guilty to all of them. Lucky for her, she escaped serving any jail time and was handed a 12-month suspended sentence. But why post that stuff online? It looks like wisdom doesn't always follow age. Number 2. Powder noses. Courtney Larkin and Ellie Norton got into a world of trouble after the police walked in on them packing and bagging nose beers to distribute. When the police burst into their apartment, they were met with quite the scene. Let's paint a picture for you. Larkin and Morton sat near a mirror and had already packed one Aldi bag full of white, not-so-legal nose beers. It was clear that they were bagging the nose beers with the intent to distribute. If you know a lot about the law, you know that packing substances like that to distribute is a huge crime that you can't just be sent to rehab for. Both women, who were in their early 20s, had been preparing for a casual lunch date, but decided to dabble in their illegal wrapping and packing business before heading out. But the police had other plans. Once the police saw the scene in front of them, they arrested both Larkin and Morton and seized their phones. The women first refused to give their phone pins, but the authorities cracked the phones and discovered that Larkin, in particular, was something of a successful illegal substances entrepreneur. The police took inventory of the goods seized and found out that the street value of what the girls were selling was about £123,000. After their arrest, the authorities discovered that Larkin and Morton were both single mothers, and Larkin had been separated from her kids by the care system. According to her lawyer, this led her to spiral into depression. After losing her kids, she turned to buying and selling nose beers, and that's what got her into trouble. Morton, on the other hand, had just gone to visit Larkin and met her bagging her nose beers. Larkin then asked Morton to help her bag so that she would be done quickly, and apparently that was the wrong day for her to start a side hustle. The judge considered all the facts and sentenced Larkin to 4 years and 11 months in prison. Morton, on the other hand, was sentenced to 2 years in prison. However, her sentence was suspended for 20 months. Morton also had to complete 150 hours of unpaid work and 40 rehabilitation days. She was fitted with an electronic curfew tag that would stop her from leaving her home from 8 p.m. to 7 a.m. This story is sort of sad because both Larkin and Morton are extremely pretty women with great figures. They could have been doing anything else. They were pretty enough to probably find some guy to take care of them or to get a large amount of fans. Pretty women tend to have a lot of options these days. And yeah, you might call us down for saying that based on morality, but let's remember what these women got in trouble for. Instead, they decided to be bagging and selling illegal substances and compromised any custody arrangements. Yeah, these ladies are pretty dumb. If you're enjoying this video, be sure to stay tuned right here for our past release to see how this guy scammed over 40 of his sugar mamas. Number 1. Flipping New Jersey. Cesar Humberto Pina, also known as Flipping NJ, has been arrested for running a Ponzi-like real estate scheme. Cesar often appeared on the popular hip-hop show Breakfast Club, hosted by Charlemagne, The God, and DJ Envy. While on the show, Cesar would promote his real estate business and tell listeners that he could provide a 45% return on investment in just 4 months. For those of you that follow the channel, key to unlocking wealth. But that was hardly correct. According to the police, Cesar took a lot of the money that people invested in his business and used it for personal expenses. He also used part of the money to pay off other investors, Ponzi style. Caesar had been running the scheme for about 6 years and had defrauded a lot of people in that time. After he was arrested, the police also raided the Breakfast Club's offices and seized electronic devices. The interesting thing about this case is that DJ Envy was also named in a criminal complaint about Caesar. However, DJ Envy has come out to deny the rumors, and why wouldn't he? DJ Envy has said that he was a part of Caesar's company, but had no idea that there was a massive fraud going on. We find that a little hard to believe, since Caesar usually took DJ Envy along on his fundraising campaigns, where he told fantastic lies to would-be investors, but innocent until proven guilty, right? DJ Envy even alleged that he's also invested in Caesar's scheme and was yet to get his money back. But that's kind of shady, right? If DJ Envy really wasn't aware of the phony promises Caesar was making, but had invested without any of the promised returns, then why didn't he regularly team up with Caesar on his seminars? Didn't he know that his presence as a celebrity gave Caesar some legitimacy? While we don't know the whole truth, it seems unlikely that DJ Envy didn't know about the Ponzi side of Caesar's business. And if he didn't know, that constitutes a pretty huge oversight on his part. Caesar has pleaded not guilty to federal wire fraud charges and has been released on $1 million bail as of the release of this video. The lesson here seems to be that if a celebrity is selling something that seems too good to be true, it probably is. Because they probably did zero due diligence on it, or even worse, they're getting paid to promote it. Between January 2016 and September of 2019, Rubin Sarpong and his squad worked together to scam women in New Jersey and the surrounding area on online dating apps. His accomplices lived in Ghana while he lived in the US. What he and the team would do is set up fake dating profiles all over the place on various dating websites such as Plenty of Fish, OkCupid, and Tinder. Sarpong would routinely hit up women on online dating sites looking for romance. Whatever platform you could think of, he was on there messaging women. He would message and quickly sweet-talk women looking for love. But then, he'd quickly turn the conversation into a promise of getting rich. It goes without saying that they would always use a fake person identity. Sometimes they'd go through the trouble of making fake IDs as well. They also had to set up numerous email addresses, numerous phone numbers, and numerous bank accounts. And most of the time, they posed as US military personnel stationed overseas. But why the military? Simply put, it's because of the fact that being in the military just makes things much easier for scammers in general. It's actually quite smart for the scammers. The fact that military personnel are stationed outside the US makes it easy for scammers to make up excuses why they don't have something a normal person would have when someone asks them questions. They can just blame everything on the fact that they're overseas in the military. Plus, there's the whole secrecy thing they can play up with the government at play. Hundreds of times a day, women all over the world are being conned by scammers posing as US service members. This is according to Chris Gray from the US Army Criminal Investigation Command. They literally get hundreds of calls a day about dating scams. Most of the victims are women in the US. They mostly range from their late 30s to late 70s. You'd think that it would be someone who's dumb and uneducated. Nope. Gray says that education doesn't matter. Plenty of highly educated people get scammed as well. According to Gray, there's one easy step to avoid getting scammed by a military imposter. Just ask to be sent an email from his or her military account ending in .mil. Gray says the scammers will do everything they can to get around this email check. They'll quickly just make up another lie, such as saying they're on a top secret mission. Hotspots for online romance scams include Nigeria and other countries in West Africa. But today, there's only a small number of personnel in the West African region. For example, fewer than 50 military and civilian employees and contractors are in Nigeria. After Sarpong establishes some virtual sparks with the women, this is when the real work starts. He starts asking them for help in the form of money. For Sarpong, gold was always involved. Sarpong would make up that money was needed for the purpose of paying to get gold bars into the US. The stories that Sarpong and his team use aren't the same every time. They tailor it for each woman. Most of the time, Sarpong would claim to be a soldier stationed in Syria. He'd say he either received, found, or was awarded gold bars. He's now rich, but he had a problem. He didn't have enough cash on hand to ship the gold bars himself. There were taxes to be paid, shipping fees, and other fake invoices that needed to be paid in order to get the gold to the US. He'd tell the women that their money would be returned once the gold bars were back to the States, and of course, they'd get a lot more money back for their efforts. Let's get into some details with the scam. One unidentified and unfortunate lady we'll call scammed victim number 1 went back and forth with Sarpong. He told her that he was stationed in Syria and his unit had received millions of dollars worth of gold bars. He told this lady that he was given one of the boxes of gold and that box was worth $12 million. Why do people fall for this? Has anyone heard of the military ever giving away gold bars to soldiers? Anyways, Sarpong started asking her if she could help him get the bars back to the US once he knew she was hooked. And this is where Sarpong usually has the ladies talk to one of his team members just so they could build some trust in the ladies' minds. In this specific instance, someone on his squad posed as a diplomat named Alwyn Rolf Liss. He was supposed to help Sarpong with the transfer of the gold back to the US. The fake diplomat would have the perfect answer for every one of her questions. How come Liss didn't have his own US bank account? Because he wasn't a US citizen. So he had the victim wire her money to his secretary's bank account. He told her this was the account he used whenever he arranged gold deliveries for people. Of course, that bank account actually belonged to Sarpong. Even after the victim wired the money over, they would keep talking to her. Why would they do this? If they found someone who would send money one time, why wouldn't they send money a second time, or a third time, or maybe a fourth time? The money just keeps coming until the women realize they're getting scammed. Basically, they're going for max value per scam here. A few days later, fake diplomat Liss told victim number one the good news. He would be flying from Syria to New York and then to Maryland with the gold. He emailed a copy of a fake airway bill that showed the 2 trunks with the quote, family treasure that were being shipped to her. The fake airway bill had her address on it. They really tried to make it seem like she was getting the gold. He was listed as the delivery agent, but there was one problem. There would be extra costs. Liss also attached a copy of a fake United Nations identity card that showed that he was an Israeli citizen and an official delivery agent for the UN. Also, he told her, that way she would recognize him when she picked him up at the airport. From approximately May 22, 2018 to June 12, 2018, Sarpong and his scam team successfully scammed almost $94,000 from this particular lady running this usual military play. But Sarpong didn't always go after women. And he didn't always use the military. He went after at least one man. Sarpong pretended to be a lady who was living in Florida in one instance. Sarpong played a lady who was waiting on a large inheritance that was mostly in gold from her dad's estate in Ghana, because whose dad wouldn't have their assets mostly in gold. We'll call this guy scammer victim number 2, or number 2 for short. Sarpong told number 2 an attorney named Mumani Muhammad was helping her get her inheritance to the US, but she needed funds in order to cover the court costs, airway bills, document fees, export fees, and taxes. She's now rich, but she just didn't have the cash on hand. Their scam is just a spin-off of the Nigerian prince scam, right? Muhammad had instructed number 2 to wire the money to Sarpong, who Muhammad would refer to as one of his sons in New Jersey. And when number 2 asked why his son had a different last name, he would just make up a different lie. You would think these scammers would be extremely careful, but they're really not. They make up a lot of sophisticated sounding lies, but they still make mistakes on the fly. But what helps them also is just the little glimmer of hope for love and money from the victim. Muhammad ended up making up the excuse that Sarpong was someone who used to work for him and that he misspoke. This guy still sent the money anyway. All for the hope of even more money coming back, along with getting to help someone who he thinks is a real woman. Number 2 eventually wired a little over $300,000 to Sarpong and his team. Of the roughly $2.1 million that they were able to scam out of people, about 40% went to Sarpong, and the remaining money went to the rest of the team. So what did Sarpong do with his portion? If you check out Sarpong's Instagram, he was definitely desperate for attention. You can just tell that he wanted the world to know that he was living it up. He craved that validation of a successful businessman. Funny thing is that no one really paid attention. None of his posts have that many likes. Ultimately, he did these scams and made some money. Instead of saving the money and trying not to get caught, here he was blowing the money on random frivolous things and posting it online. It's like he almost wanted to get caught. Investigators eventually caught on to Sarpong and his team. They said that he was the ringleader of the international operation that scammed over 30 women. He was charged in federal court with just a single count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud. And he was the only one actually charged because everyone else was international. Here's the craziest thing. He actually asked a judge to assign him to a public defender. Why? Because he claimed he didn't have enough money to pay for a lawyer. Click to watch one of these next videos. Let us know in the comment section who you would rather pick for president, Paris Hilton or Kim Kardashian.